Okay, well, I'm going to get started as a few more audience members come in here. It's really a wonderful pleasure to welcome Kimberly Garza to the University of Nebraska. We're so happy to have you here, Kim. Thank you for traveling from Sacramento, California, where you do not have any snow. So we're really thrilled to have you. Kim is a graduate of the University of California at Berkeley. She has an undergraduate degree in landscape architecture. She's worked at a wide array of landscape architecture firms professionally. She worked for the Broussard Group in San Antonio, Texas, and then went back to graduate school to the Harvard Graduate School of Design. After graduating from the GSD, she worked for Reed Hildebrand for a series of years, and then moved out to Sacramento to start her own business. And I think it's really exciting today about today's lecture is that she's going to look at concepts looking at design now within landscape architecture and within really improving the urban fabric and urban design within Sacramento. She's the founding principal of Atlas Lab, and she also teaches at the University of California at Davis. So thank you so much for joining us, and we are looking forward to your lecture. So.
Great,
yeah, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. Hello, everyone. Hi, I'm super excited to be here. I think I use my hands and I move a lot, so hopefully that will entertain you this afternoon. So, just wanted to see if that's, maybe it went to sleep. There we are. So as mentioned, I am founder and principal of Atlas Lab. And Atlas Lab is a public art, landscape architecture, and urban design studio based in Sacramento, California. And we create with purpose. The way people interact and feel in a space is the foundation to everything we do. We are extremely passionate about designing humanistic and artistic design solutions to cities that are historically, culturally, and ecologically responsive. Our work balances whimsy with architectural rigor, testing materials, and technology. And so today's lecture will really be focused on tactical urbanism, the concept of tactical urbanism. Have you guys heard that term? A show of hands? Yes? Okay, great. We'll talk more about it. And urban prototyping. And so why are we prototyping? Why has this phenomenon of tactical urbanism emerged? And so I like to kind of step back and kind of define these because they're used interchangeably often, and I think it's really important to kind of clarify their definitions. So tactical urbanism is really a process. It's a city, organization, or a citizen-led approach to neighborhood building and project delivery using short-term, low-cost, and scalable projects intended to catalyze long-term change. And urban prototyping is the use of lightweight physical design projects to inform mid to long-term responses to challenges found throughout the urban environment. So urban prototyping is that physical manifestation. It's the actual tool or strategy used as part of a tactical urbanism process. And so how has this come about? This is not new. Tactical urbanism has been happening, but in the recent decade, tactical urbanism has emerged as more of a way that we approach design because there's been shifts in demographics, there's citizen frustration, the Great Recession happened, and radical connectivity through social media. And I like to kind of really highlight the citizen frustration and the Great Recession. When the recession happened and I was working during this period, work slowed down. There was not a lot of projects. All the construction projects went on hold. And what that means is growth's not happening, change is typically not happening. And so citizens get frustrated that why can't things change? And that really happened to me. I was sitting at work and I was just like, oh my God, what am I doing? I think I need to go back to school. So that's what I ended up doing during that time. And so another frustration too is that project delivery is overly focused on long-term projects which are expensive and politically challenging. And as you emerging professionals go out in the field, you'll notice and feel, you'll start working, and oftentimes you'll be working on projects that are have really long timelines, and 3, 5, 7, 10, maybe 20-year timelines. And so you can be in a position where you're working, and not really seeing anything built. And so there's a frustration from even the designer themselves that wants to see more critical kind of or more fast-paced changes happening. And so all of that has led to me personally, I hit 10 years into my career, I hit this point where I worked at really great firms, both boutique and corporate, and I found myself saying, who am I? What is my perspective? What is my point of view? What am I doing? What is my voice as a designer? We start working in firms and we kind of adopt design methodology or approaches, and we kind of get lost in why we became designers in the first place. And so for me, I kind of had to ask that question. So show of hands, how many have gotten into design through art because they were attracted to art and loved drawing? So a good show of hands there. That was my focus, why I got into design, why I was passionate about exploring landscape architecture, because I really was attracted to landscape-based artists, and I was really fascinated by the work of Peter Walker and Martha Schwartz and Mikyung Kim, and that's really why I got into the field. And so after 10 years, I was like, well, am I doing any art projects? Am I making an impact? Am I doing any of that work? And so I think this is important that you pin this up for yourself when you're working anywhere you're at, and ask these questions to yourself. And it's just an important kind of check-in. And today with that, I'm going to be focusing and talking about 3 projects that are tactical in nature. They're urban prototypes that I've worked on. And 2 of them are in Sacramento and 1 of them is in San Francisco. So the first one I'll talk about is Portal. And to give you a little bit more context, I had been working, I had just moved back to Sacramento. I grew up in Sacramento, left for 10 years, came back, and I said, new chapter, fresh start, what can I do? And immediately when I moved, I just started saying, how can I connect to my community? How can I start designing now? I don't want to wait another few years to have a project get built. So with that, I started looking, I just started walking my city, started walking the city, and the R Street corridor is a up-and-coming corridor in Sacramento. Lots of great things are happening along it, new bars, housing, and so with that, there was this condition happening, and this was back in end of 2014, 2015. This is what the corridor looked like. Industrial buildings, unoccupied landscape, kind of a scary place to be in. I don't have a picture, unfortunately, of it in the nighttime, but not a really inviting environment. So in this case, I just found a site that I was interested in. And then I just started drawing. Decided, what if I put something on this street? How could I activate the street? How could I get people to walk down the street? How could I catch their eye? And so I just quickly, in sketch mode and then into Photoshop sketches, I just started drawing this frame. And I then said, well, what could the frame be? Could it be this light installation that people could interact with? And so that kind of was the basis for it. And so in this one, the initial one was that we would have wood slats on the outside of it, and then with an interior, the interior would have mirrored plexi, and then at night, could it start to illuminate? And then I just started riffing on some new ideas. I said, okay, could it be light? Then could it have vegetation? Could it support more artwork by other local artists? And then in addition to that, how could I activate it? How could I program it? So I just kind of started with this light-based installation and then started looking at programming. Could it support kind of a food truck experience? Could it do a pop-up cooking class? Could we have a movie night? Could we have a music performance? And these were just ideas that were just on paper that could change that environment. And so as that happened, those ideas kind of got more solidified into this rendering. So I just took an existing site image and I overlaid this sketch of this light sculpture. And then I just started collaborating and talking to folks. And my friend that I met in Sacramento, Trey Borden, he was a really great connector in Sacramento. He's not in design whatsoever, but he's an entrepreneur. And he said, hey, Kim, well, I'll help with the programming of this. You work on the design, and we'll just take over the street, and we'll do like a month of programming with it. So with this, it was really great because I worked with somebody outside the field so they could provide a new perspective, which is always really great. And we just started shopping this image around. We met with the Property Improvements District, the local one, and asked, would you guys support this installation that we're calling Portal? And they said, sure, we'll give you $7,000. And we were like, wow, okay, great. And we kind of priced this out, including labor, at about $10,000. And so through this sketch, I was able to kind of generate a rough budget and then figure out, okay, how are we going to fund it? So we just started asking people to contribute to this. And what's really great is that once you get one person to say yes to you, it's so much easier to get the next person to say yes. Because they said, well, that person approved it. Oh, there might be something here. So with that, we then started working on this concept of activating the street for 3 weeks. And we were going to do 3 weeks of programming. The installation was going to show up overnight, and then we were going to have a schedule of events. And this is where my collaborator, Trey, really helped kind of outreach to different organizations. And how we asked for funding is that we asked the different, let's say for instance, a nonprofit, we said, hey, if you do your launch here, or you have a showcase here, or if a yoga class wanted to show up, we said if you contribute a small portion of funds, well, let's say $500, you can use the space for a whole day. And so we were getting funding that way and through just general donations. So I used Squarespace to create a website and then created this schedule of events. And so I was doing a lot of, wearing a lot of hats for this project, from programming to figuring out event coordination to developing our calendar of events and managing a website. But it was really great because it's a lesson learned and tools that I think all of us are learning as we go along. So with that, we kind of questioned, well, how are we going to get this built? I don't know how to build things. I'm not a fabricator, but I know how to kind of execute drawings to communicate my design ideas. So with that, we did outreach to the local maker community, and in this case, they're called the Hacker Lab. And it's a bunch of makers who just want to make things, but we shared this idea and they said, sure, we'll help you make it. So in this picture, that's myself on the left, there's Trey in the back, and we were working with Matt Poor here from the Hacker Lab, and he kind of said, oh great, yes, I could do that. We can order the plexi, and so it was a really, really great collaboration. From there, we were able to use their warehouse to then build the structure, so you can't see it here, but we were able to start to see the scale, and my face is like, oh wow, that's really big. So I think it was really great to start testing these things, and again, going to that one-to-one scale is just so exciting to finally kind of see this sketch that I was just working on a month ago, and really starting to see it come together in real life. And then what was really cool about this is that, we kept kind of with a similar material palette as originally designed, that we used these wood slats, we embedded LEDs into them. And then with that, since we started to do that, then we reached out to local media and tried to create a buzz for the project. And so here, Portal points way towards our street's future. And so we just started to say, like, our street's this burgeoning corridor and all these great things are happening, but a portion of it, it's kind of dead and kind of scary to approach, and how this installation could be part of that transformation. And so it was really great, and this is things that I would recommend to everyone, is that don't be scared to reach out to media and create a press release and start sharing your work and kind of building a buzz for it. So as part of that buzz, we then developed a flyer, and simple kind of Photoshop, Illustrator, and said coming soon. And so we started to share this on social media, and it was a really great way to spread the word. In addition to that, using the network that you currently have, so as a practitioner, I had a list of clients and colleagues that I then developed an email and shared the project with them as well to get them to participate. Another thing we did, this is me, I'm spray I'm using spray chalk to imprint #PortalSac along the streetscape itself. And so anytime anybody used the #PortalSac, the installation would change in color. So it was social media responsive installation, which we didn't really advertise, but it just kind of, we wanted it to kind of be this thing that happened, and just kind of a nice little surprise for people that would come visit the sculpture itself. We also use that hashtag to connect to social media on our website. So as that project, anytime anybody used it, you could start to see how people used the installation. And that was really great because you can start to test, is this project successful? Are people liking it? What are they taking pictures of in particular? And most of it was definitely a lot of selfies and group photos, but that's great. We wanted that. We wanted that that interactive quality to it, which was really, really great. And we just used a plugin on the website to share these images. So here we are on launch day. We had really a great attendance of folks showing up. And so they first came and said, what is this? You know, it's this tall structure, because at night it really comes to life. But we had food trucks. We also worked with the local planning association chapter, where we got them to ask questions about our street and have a kind of engagement conversation about what should happen on our street. And then we hosted over 20 events. We had an open mic night. We worked with the local ASLA chapter, the Sierra chapter, and they did a plant takeover where they brought 3,000 plants and took over the entire street. And we went from kind of industrial lack of vegetation to this like beautiful planting showcase, and also had a brunch that morning. We had a discussion on homelessness. Nonprofit participated in this. And then my favorite night ever in my life is that we had a silent disco event. And it was great because we hadn't had a silent disco in Sacramento, and so we were really happy to host one of the first silent discos in Sacramento. So people were dancing, I mean, having the best time ever, and the lights were pulsating, you know, the lights of the structure were pulsing with the music. It was really, really cool. And then we had a Clueless movie night, which was another one of my favorite events that happened. And then the project, you have to think about, okay, well, what happens like after this? We had such great success. So many people were coming through. And then the project ended with us transporting it to a music festival that was happening that summer in Sacramento. It was a 3-day music festival. So at the end of those 3 weeks, we picked it up, kind of took it apart, put it back together, and had it at the TBD Fest. And so this is impossible to read, but I like to show it just graphically because this shows the process in which our process of getting this project done. It wasn't a linear, completely linear approach where a traditional design process is schematic design, design development, construction. This was very different, where we found a site that compelled us to do something. Then we had sketches, then we looked for funding, and then we went back, and then as that's happening simultaneously, we're thinking about programming, how people are going to come, how are we going to get it built, how are we going to get it permitted, and then all our sponsors and how we were going to engage them. So it's definitely a more complex and not a straightforward kind of guidebook of how getting it done, but I think it's just helpful to kind of see that it's pretty complex. So the takeaways of this is for you guys as emerging professionals, is to think about finding a site that you're drawn to, that inspires you to do something. And I think all of us have had moments where we're walking in our hometowns or in a city, and you say, oh, why isn't somebody doing something with that? And so I was, fascinated with our street. Collaborate with, folks outside the field of design. I think that's really helpful because it provides a different perspective and provides a different set of resources as well. So really push yourself to collaborate with each other outside your respective fields, and then just people totally outside of design. Because I wouldn't have thought about reaching out to media if I didn't have my collaborator saying, yeah, let's reach out to media. And that's to say, to reach out, create a press release, and use social media to get the word out there. Again, if these things are happening kind of overnight, social media is our best friend to kind of share that, share your project with the world, because there's not a traditional process to this. Again, just keep in mind, there was no request for proposals, there was not a call to artists, it was just, we found a site, we had a dream for it, came up with a sketch, and found a way to get it done. And so that's very different than a traditional project call. And that means you guys have the power to do this yourselves. You guys have the tools to do this, and I just want to push you, encourage you guys to just outreach. And in that process, I also really connected with my community and learned so many different, about way more organizations than I thought I knew. And it was just such a great learning experience. So Peak Experience, another temporary installation, and this is located in San Francisco, California. This is different because there was a call for designers, artists, citizens, to take over Market Street. Market Street is the largest thoroughfare in San Francisco. It is approximately 2.5 miles long, and it's currently going through a what they're calling Better Market Street streetscape initiative, where they're making improvements to it. As they're making infrastructural improvements to the street, they thought, well, why don't we include the community as part of the design conversation? And so the city planning department and the Urbanism for the Arts collaborated together to host this Market Street prototyping festival. So they did a call, asked for 50 designers, artists, whoever it may be, to take over that stretch of Market Street. And to kind of give you context, it is such a large thoroughfare that they broke it up into 5 districts, and then each district got 10 installations. And the installations were 10 by 10. Generally, they kind of were a little loose with it, but generally 10 by 10 area footprint to play around with, and the budget was $2,000. So we saw this call and said, yes, we want to participate. So as part of that, before we were selected for it, we came up with our design concept. And so when you think of this, San Francisco, you think of the hills. And I immediately was drawn to that, and that was kind of my, the hills were my muse. And sorry, this is very hard to read, but it's kind of a complicated drawing in the sense it's the topography of San Francisco. And what I did is I was doing some design research and found out that San Francisco has 53 hills. And it was just a blog I found of an author who was just writing about the different hills, the unnamed hills, and the more prominent ones. And so I just started to map those out over a topographic map. And so this wasn't created, I didn't find this, I had to kind of make this to just explore the topography and really understand it. And so what even pushed me more was that on Market Street, you do not see the hills of San Francisco. It doesn't have any hills, and so it's actually the most flat, it's pretty flat compared to the rest of the city. So I started cataloging the different elevation changes of these hills and then started narrowing it down to kind of the top 10. And these were really kind of the most iconic hills that you hear about. And these hills define neighborhoods, they define communities. And I was really interested in this. And so you can see just kind of the different landmarks and the different characters of these hills. So with that, the concept strategy that we developed was, 1, the setting, San Francisco is the city of hills. 2, the site is Market Street lacks views of San Francisco's iconic landscape. And 3, the opportunity was to have topography as an agent for change, as an agent for discovery, play, and engagement on Market Street. And the overall vision was to create to establish a unique cultural corridor for Market Street. So from here, this was the bigger idea. I always think big. I know we were given a 10 by 10 area, but I always like to, for the proposal, I always kind of like to start at a larger master plan level, like if we got this project built and we could do it across all of Market, what would it look like? And so we just started kind of laying this out along the streetscape zone and started coming up with conceptual sections to say that could we bring those hills and create miniature versions of them onto the street themselves, and that could they create a really kind of playful experience for seating, lounging, playing, and then thinking about that surface being a rubberized surface. So then we developed some renderings of what that idea could be. We just took that area, the largest, it's a really, really wide, generous sidewalk to afford this kind of design move, but what we did is that we kept with this color theme because we wanted to capture people's attention, that we used this bright pink, and we started deploying those 10 hills across those one particular block that we were given, or we were generally assigned to. So as we deployed that, and then we overlaid the streets that overlaid the street grid onto the hills. And then here's another view. Kind of crazy, kind of nuts, but we were going for it. And that's what's nice about these different design calls, that you could just kind of dream big. So with that, we knew we had to narrow it down, and we had to figure out which hills were we going to construct. So based on that, we were accepted as one of the 50 designers that were going to overtake Market Street for 3 days. We then participated in 2 community engagement events. And so one of them, we were on the street asking folks, what is your favorite hill of San Francisco? And so the competition had supplied us some general questions to ask the public, but for us, we kind of found that we started doing our own questions that were completely tailored to our project. So keep in mind that was really, really helpful for us. So we started asking people, like, what's your favorite hill? And then they had lots of opinions. They wanted to get their neighborhood represented. And so it was really great. From this, we were able to kind of narrow down what everybody's favorite hill was. And so we then narrowed it down to 3. Luckily, they were geographically close to each other, which was Nob Hill, Russian Hill, and Telegraph Hill. And we decided that it was going to be, these miniature hills that were going to be made out of rubberized surfacing. So here's a rendering of that, that reduced, I call the design development and budget-friendly version of our project that we developed, and that was going to be the site that we were assigned a specific site, and so we laid it there. We dropped it into the existing site photo, and then we had to think about, okay, how are we going to build this? And we decided we were going to use geofoam, which is structural foam, kind of styrofoam in a way, that we can then mill at a fabrication company. We can supply our Rhino 3D model, give it to the fabricator, and then they were going to CNC mill the hills for us. And then from there, we were going to use rubberized surfacing to coat the geofoam to provide that more durable surface for folks to sit or play on. So from there, this is really, really helpful because, again, I've never had taken a 3D model and really output a urban prototype using it. So it was really great exercise. And so again, how urban prototyping can help us as designers use technology and test scale is really great. So we started off, we looked at the dimensions that the geofoam comes in. We realized we could get 3 blocks of it in our budget. We then played around in Rhino to break them up into sections that could help then compile what the milled model would look like. Then I ran a slope analysis study on this, and this came about because I had learned from Portal to just ask, right? Just ask for funding, ask for sponsorship opportunities. And so I approached a playscape rep that I had been working with, and I said, would you guys be interested in supplying the rubberized surfacing for this project? And from that, I will list you as a project sponsor. And so it's a great way you can bargain that way as well, right? So with that, they said, well, we don't know if we can do those steep slopes. We don't know if the rubberized surfacing will stay on the geofoam. And that was really great because we were helping each other out because we were using this as a test. It was a prototype to see if that rubberized surfacing would stay on those slopes. So we ran this slope analysis and we said, okay, these are the areas that we think are going to be problematic. And we vertically exaggerated the topography because we wanted that census scale. We wanted them to be at least 3 to 4 feet in height on the street, which then if you kept the horizontal scale, it created the steepness. Because if you then squish it back down, then it doesn't really work and it doesn't have the same impact on the street. So from there, we then got it fabricated, working with Chrysler and Associates in the Bay Area. They used this giant robot and I just was so giddy. I was so excited to see this come to life and how it was really working. How we thought of it was gonna work was happening. So from there, they milled it and you can see how they stitched the different parts together here. They glued it. And then we picked those up, got a U-Haul truck and moved it and took it over to the rubberized surfacing plant where they did the coating here. And so that was really great. They were all excited. Everybody came out to see like, oh, how's it working? How thick can we get it? How can it stay? And that was really, really great. So from there, we then put it in a U-Haul truck. And this is important to note that when we're doing urban prototypes, we have to think about how we're going to transport them and the weight of them. I didn't think about that initially, right? So we had to, in the initial rendering, I showed the 3 and kind of set up as a triangle. And we said, well, the U-Haul's not that wide. So we had to separate them out, which was a great learning lesson. And we also had called different movers and they were quoting us like an obscene amount of money to just move these like 45 miles, and we just said, we'll just do it ourselves. And the geofoam is light. It feels like styrofoam. So that was really easy to move in. And then also having a great friend and family network that will help you move these. That's my husband there. So we brought it home, we painted it, and we did our own painting. We added elevation markers to them, and then we labeled the hills on there. And we kept with the same, we were fretting about the color. Should it be pink? Why is it pink? I just said, because I want it to be eye-catching, but what does it represent? And we started getting really philosophical about it, and then we ended up with pink. So it was fun. Pink wins, okay? So we also had fun when we got it on the street. We had dolly system to help us move it across the street, and so it was really great. We had this moment, I don't have the other shot, but we're going down Market Street and the hills of San Francisco are moving across it, and that was really fun. And then they landed on the street. So this is the first, at opening day, we laid them just directly onto the sidewalk. They stayed in place, they didn't move. They were lightweight, but yet very sturdy and firm, so it was really great that we didn't have to worry about connections to the ground, and those are things you guys need to think about too. If your installation needs footings, maybe want to rethink that if you can't penetrate the ground because it's a temporary installation. Just think about how you're going to control things staying in place. But this was such an incredible moment. I've been working months and months on this. 3-day installation, okay? Months and months on this for 3 days. And I get so tired and I go, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And then right when we put it down, kids ran up and started playing on it. And it's like, oh, this is why I'm doing it. You see immediate use of it and how much joy you're bringing. And it's just like, oh, okay, I'm in the right field. And then it was just great to see how kids were using it and just being fearless about it too. I mean, I was getting nervous the whole time, like they're gonna fall, they're gonna break, somebody's gonna break something, but it didn't happen. And they were using it in ways I didn't even think that they were gonna use it. And so that was really, really powerful, that the activity was just different. Even the way it was configured was different from the initial sketch, but it was better in real life. And then here you could see the other installations in the background that were happening simultaneously in addition to our installation, which I like to say ours was the best. Another interesting observation is that kids loved it, ran up to it, played on it, jumped on it. Meanwhile, the adults were like, what is this? And they slowly would approach it and slowly tap it and touch it. And they'd go, what is the material? They were just a little more cautious about it. And when they did figure out what it was and that wasn't gonna bite them, then they would use on it and they would lean on it and use it as a bench to check their phone typically. So that's how they were using it. But this is such a great way to test how and study how people use the designs that you create. And so rather than investing in my crazy pink hills going all the way down the street, we could start testing what works here. So the takeaways for this project is look for local regional art design calls, okay? Just keep your eyes out for that. Ask for sponsorship, just cold call or cold email nowadays, different reps, furnishing reps, and say, hey, would you contribute 3 chairs to my parklet I'm designing? If so, I will, tag you and I will, put your logo on our social media, whatnot. That's a really great way to get their buy-in. Also, think about transportation. Think about the weight of it. How are you going to get it in your truck? Stay on budget. We went way over budget on this one, but we wanted to test things, and I gained so much out of it. But we went over budget on it, and it's a great way to monitor how it's used and who's using it. I forgot to mention here. Think about the second life. So after this, I had the mounds ended up back at my house, and I said, what am I gonna do with these hills? What am I gonna do with these hills? I didn't think about what the end game was. But it was great that the city of San Francisco reached out to me and said, can we have another vacant parcel? Could we have your installation? Done. So I, did a release of liability, gave them the mounts, and so they're living in another pop-up park in San Francisco. So really great way, still there today. And since it was built to really last, it's still holding up 3 years later. And then the last project I'll talk about is Micro Dune, another temporary installation. This one came out of my participation with the local Sacramento Metro Chamber. They have an emerging professionals a division as part of the Metro Chamber, and they host an annual Young Leaders Summit. And as part of the summit, they kind of asked for a big ideas challenge, and they asked young professionals, like, in Sacramento, what would you like to see change? Where, if you could change something, what would you do? And as they asked this, as a landscape architect, I said, it needs to be a landscape urban design issue I want to solve. And so currently in Sacramento, we are disconnected from our riverfront. There's a highway that separates the city to the river, and so my main thesis was to connect the city of Sacramento back to the river. So upon that thesis, I started just doing research about what Sacramento used to be. So historically, early 1800s, it was a freshwater, to orient you, Sacramento's up here. It's part of the San Joaquin Delta. And pre-development, it was a freshwater wetland that then, due to all the flooding issues that we have in Sacramento, we have a pretty extensive levee network that controls our flooding. And so with that, we now have really agricultural-based landscape now. So it's completely been modified. And so as I started to study what the landscape used to look like before our wonderful levee network, our levee network, found out there was sand dunes that used to happen, these inland sand dunes that existed. And I was gravitating to these sand dunes because Sacramento is very flat. And so any topography that I found historically, I was like, oh, I'm really into that. And I was coming off the hills, and I had topography in my brain, and I was kind of still riffing off that idea. And so based on that, I said, taking cues from the historical Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta ecology, we proposed an installation that embodies the historical sand dunes, pre-1850s, paired with active programming. So kind of refined my thesis statement, and then from there proposed this giant artificial dune. And again, didn't have a budget in mind. Knew this was going to happen somewhere along the river, but just started applying a scale to it. And so the concept was that shipping containers were starting to get pretty big in Sacramento. People were starting to get familiar with that kind of building type. And so I said, well, could it be this landscape typology, could it be supported by a shipping container or a series of shipping containers? And how big could that be? And so started playing around, overlaying different scales to it, and then overlaying enough, playing around with the dimensions to kind of support some type of programming at the base of it. So kind of treating it like an amphitheater in a way. And the reason why we have the height is that the levees block our views to the river in Sacramento. So you need to get up really high to even see the water. And so I wanted to create something, building off the sand dune concept, started kind of saying, oh, okay, could we create an area that has an overlook? And then could we then support embed some type of vending kiosk, a pop-up beer shop, or a clothing or a maker space inside the dune? Could we add vegetation? So in our hot summer months, we have a kind of cooling element to it. And then we would then introduce this kind of sand surface. So kind of very playful take on a sand dune. And then looked at programming. So this is kind of similar to Portal, right? I came up with kind of some general ideas for Portal and then thought about how does that frame or support different programming activities. And so in this case, we looked at a volleyball court, kind of sunbathing, lounging experience, performances, or a movie night. And then kind of started to dream up what that would look like along the riverfront there. And so this is a rendering of an existing photo that occurs along the waterfront, several vacant parcels, so this could definitely fit there. And then overlaid the dune onto it and kind of started to dream up the kind of different programming possibilities that are happening in close proximity to this area. And then what is that experience at night? And then could the backside then again have this kind of vending experience? So based on all my experiences to date, I then hit the streets and shared it with media. And this was Sacktown magazine, and it says, local landscape designer aims to turn Sacramento riverfront into urban beachfront. And again, it's just about dreaming these ideas that can start influencing our expectations in our own cities, I think is very powerful. And having really great connections to, in this case, Sacktown magazine, they're really great about, talking and describing different urban design issues we have in Sacramento. So finding those in your own local communities to share the idea is really, really been beneficial. So I chopped this around, started asking, the actual owner of those vacant parcels was totally wanting to have this happen. It was just, they said this can happen, but you gotta find the funding. And it just became very overwhelming. I was still, working a full-time job, having, and doing this kind of evenings and nights, or my evenings and weekends. And so it was just really, looking at this, the scale of this project and the budget was just more than $10,000. It was more than $20,000. We were looking at, $250,000 to $500,000. And so it was too much. So in that, I always say, think big, start small. So with that, I already thought big, and I said, well, how can I just get this idea off the ground? And with that, I said, let's just start off with one shipping container. Can we just do it with one? And I think this was really, I was like, okay, 1-to-1 scale again. Okay, we can do this. Let's get tactical with it. And did that, contacted a local shipping company, a shipping container company, asked if they would donate one of their shipping containers and help me modify it. Did that, and I called it, in this case, the micro dune. And it was really great because in this process was able to transport this project to different neighborhoods and really have a great design conversation. We had a great event. We activated this vacant lot in a pretty urban neighborhood here. We, again, worked with the local ASLA chapter, and we had, this was on our first Friday, which is our kind of arts arts walk in Sacramento, and this was part of that. There was a DJ playing, and it was full chaos for the kids. They loved it. They ran up to it and were playing, and all the parents came up to me and said, "Oh my God, thank you so much. Like, you know, I go to these, I want to participate and do this arts walk, but there's nothing for my children to do. There's nothing safe for them to do." And so they really appreciated having just a playful moment for their families. But I also use this as an opportunity to use the installation itself to create a conversation. And so with this, using the same tools from Market Street Prototyping Festival, I just started posing questions about the river. What do you guys want to see? How would you, questions about improving the installation itself. And after we first used it, we didn't really plan. The first time we used it, all the sand started kind of, with kids running back and forth, it would kind of dump out right here. So the second iteration, when we had it open, we just put a pad of AstroTurf down, and it was really easy because we could just lift it up, pour back the sand into it, and it was pretty easy maintenance on that. But really easy to maneuver and transport. And then we also had some signage about the installation itself to kind of bring awareness. So the takeaways from that project was to think big, start small, to use the installation as a strategy for direct feedback. So really, it's different in the case where you're watching the prototype and seeing how people use it versus using a prototype to start a conversation. And so that was really great. Mobility is your friend. Something that you can transport easy is really great. I didn't share it today, but I have another project called Topo Share, and it uses 500 milk crates to create this topographic seating experience. And with that, it all lives in a pod. When we go out to an event, we take out the 500 milk crates, we zip tie them. When we're done, we snip them, put them back in the ship. We put them back in the pod, the storage pod, and it goes into storage until we need it again. So think. I'm getting more smart about how to move these installations around. And then, study what works and just keep pushing these ideas. The Dune project didn't happen, but what I will say is what's great about it is that it's led to current projects that are on the drawing board, so that these urban prototyping projects can have a bigger impact in your community. So with that, based on, I want to say on the conversations that have been generated about the waterfront and our need to have an experience with it, there's currently an Old Sacramento waterfront competition happening right now. And we, Atlas Lab, are one of the participants, professional teams that were chosen to come up with visions for Sacramento. And that is now, has a budget associated with it, multi-million-dollar budget associated with it. And that's really great because now I could start to take these ideas that have been generated through these sketches and these prototypes, and we're using that as the basis and the foundation as we move forward in our design schemes. The second one is we were able to get our first public art commission out of all the urban prototypes that I've been doing the last 7 years. It's secured our first arts commission. So the Sacramento Convention Center is going through a renovation. As part of that renovation, it's a pretty large renovation, and as part of it, they had to allocate some funds for public art that would happen in this plaza right here. And we then submitted our qualifications for it, and I do not have an MFA, but I wear my landscape hat most of the time, and I saw that call. And so this is to say that you guys need to just find calls and different art calls and just apply for them. It doesn't hurt. You just gotta try, And so we tried, and it was narrowed down to 3 artists that were interviewed, and we're really happy to say that we got selected for it. And our proposal, this is one concept. It's now since changed, but this is under development and on the drawing boards right now. But Sacramento has this phenomenon called the Delta Breeze. And the Delta Breeze, in the summertime, comes in around 5 p.m. and a cool breeze from the bay comes in and cools off our triple-digit days. days, which is phenomenal. So we'll go from 100 degrees down to 60 degrees in the evening. And we wanted an installation that responded to the wind. And so what we did is that we had this wind responsive light installation where it really blurs the line between landscape and art. And we didn't want to create kind of a static object. We wanted these forms to just kind of emerge out of the plaza itself. And so with that, these forms emerge that become seating areas for visitors, but that they move up to 15 feet in height to register the wind sensors that are on top. And as it registers the wind, the colors change. The installation itself changes in color. So we're really, really excited about this. It's under development. I think our site has even changed, so we're still under this, but it's been great because all this work has led to other things that have become, really have been aligned with what my perspective is and what I care about and what I'm passionate about. So again, I think if you guys can I hope this inspires you guys to really take control of your passion, and don't always think that the end game is, okay, I go out, I find a job, I clock in, I clock out, and that you can really have a big change in your community. So with that, thank you so much. If you guys want to, follow me on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter at Atlas Lab, or you can find out more at atlaslab.com. So thank you so much.
Are there questions from the audience for Kim?
On the final,
Oh, I'll go to Eileen, and then I'll go to you second. All right, Eileen.
This was all very interesting. The first project that you talked about in Sacramento, the R Street corridor, did anything ever happen with that after you had that 3 weeks of activity and then you moved your piece away?
Great question. I got an email a week after it was complete from a resident in the area, and he said, I'm reaching out to say thank you. You made my street safe for this last month, and I wasn't scared to walk down the street. So that was one impact, which was really great. And a testament how public art and landscape can really change the way, even if it's temporary in nature, how we feel in a space. And then the second was that we ended up, we wanted it to just be final and be done with, and just this blip that happened. But what we did was that we donated most of the materials of the installation back to the Hacker Lab. So the makers were able to reuse it.
I just want to know if there was a reason why we had the sensor data on the last design built into the installation itself, not separate with the data transmitted to the installation.
That one was something we were working out. We were playing with putting them on the installation on the top of them themselves, and that's why the forms were as high as they were to register the wind. We were trying to kind of reduce the kind of travel electrical lines going to the very top of the building, or it could be programmed to another weather center at the airport. It could be, but like I said, we're now in development and kind of things are changing, so we'll see how that ends up kind of that design element gets worked out.
Any other one last question? Well, if you guys have questions, you're always welcome to come ask them to Kimberly directly. Thank you so much for our talk, and enjoy your weekend.
Thank you.